what I think I'm seeing here in this is an effort to understand like what is transformation made of and how can we decompose that into the parts of transformation and facilitate those parts in the correct order such that transformation occurs or something like that. And it reminds me a lot of how I expected to be able to work with myself and with other people. And I feel like I've done the let's design the one true framework activity quite a bit, like enough to see something about the truth of like there not being a fully universal flowchart, or that's like part of what's hard about the DAO is the DAO that you can write down is different from the DAO itself. So I would have done a lot of things different, because to me this does feel like we're walking through a flowchart, which can be extraordinarily effective, but loses some of the native responsiveness that I think is so important.
Transformational perspectives.
Hey, welcome to episode 3 of Transformational Perspectives. In this episode, we are working with Cristofer Lovgren. This episode was really interesting because it was actually recorded over on Cristofer's podcast and shared with his audience before I then brought it over to here. And having published it there first, I started getting a lot of feedback. Wow, you're such a good coach. You're so good. This is so amazing. You're an amazing coach. And having done this sort of work on myself for about 19 years at this point, and working with others for maybe 6 to 10, depending on what I want to count as working with others with this sort of work, I've gotten to the point where I consider myself a pretty bad coach, which is a big step up. I was awful for a long time, and I'm pretty bad. But my ego really liked to hear this, oh, you're so good, you're pretty good, you're an amazing coach. And I started to layer over this deep experiential knowing that, I'm a pretty bad coach. I can make things happen. I'm fairly skilled compared to the average coach. But there's still a long way to go. With, oh, I'm amazing, I like this, I like people saying I'm amazing, I must be so good, everybody's saying I'm so good. And I started to grasp onto this. My ego started to hold onto this. And then I recorded this episode. And on comes Adam Jensen and Malcolm Ocean. And they said, hey, Matt, you're a pretty bad coach. And my ego really did not like this. So I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but again, this is good for my ego to say. I got a little defensive in this episode, and you're going to hear it a few times. I deeply trust Malcolm and Adam, and I deeply respect their opinions. And a lot of the things they say there, I've already begun to implement as I move forward in my coaching. So as we move forward here, 1 or 2 times you'll hear me do a quick clip just saying, hey, I was a little defensive there. I actually agree with what they just said. Otherwise, just this is all I'll say. I'm very excited to share this episode, and enjoy.
If you want the full session, please check out Cristofer's podcast, Do Explain. The other half of the session that we are not going to cover today is over there. Check out the link in the show notes. Today, we are joined by 2 guests. One of them is Malcolm Ocean. I've known him for a long time. We've talked about a lot of different self-improvement things together. I've coached at some of his workshops. And Malcolm created this weekly meeting group about secure attachment based on this course called that presences this word called the ideal parent figure. So in that group, I also met Adam Jensen, our other guest today, who has done a lot of thinking a lot of personal work and a lot of reading on attachment styles and creating secure attachment as well. So Malcolm, do you want to start with introducing yourself?
Yeah, in the context of the kind of stuff we're talking about, I guess the thing that I would say is I've been really interested in deep, sort of deep mindset reframing type stuff for a long time. And then a couple of years ago, went to a bioemotive workshop with Doug Tatarin at Maple, where Matt presently is. And that really kind of opened me up to this whole thing of like, oh, you can't just impose a reframe. You need to like dialogue the reframe with whatever's kind of already there. And then a few months later, I read Unlocking the Emotional Brain. And since then, I've really been interested in this question of what do the principles of unlocking the emotional brain imply for conversation in general and for relationships in general. So I've been looking, a bit at the kind of one-on-one therapeutic process of that. But really, I would say kind of more of what I've been thinking about a lot has been just like, yeah, what does it, insofar as everything that anybody is saying or doing makes a kind of sense, what does it mean to like have conversations and relationships based on that as an understanding, as opposed to an idea where somebody can be intrinsically confused in a sense? Well, words are what they are. Anyway,
Sure.
Yeah. So that's a big question for me. And I guess I would also say I'm interested in exploring how to apply some of these principles of coherence and attachment and so on to apps as well, such as the productivity app that I make, Complice.
And just for anybody who's listening to the podcast, who's heard me talk about memory reconsolidation, when Malcolm is talking about the principles in the unlocking the emotional brain, that's really the first book that theorized that these sorts of transformations were coming from a memory reconsolidation process in the brain. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. By training, I'm a computer scientist. By experience, worked in product management. And due to the school of hard knocks, I've had to learn a lot about personal emotional development. And that's led me to recently studying attachment theory in some detail. I'll focus more on that, given that that's the relevant thing for this particular show. I have a ton of experience in individual meditation traditions, which was all inspired by my own struggles with chronic pain. It took me a very, very long time to realize that chronic pain for most people, call it 8 out of 10, is fundamentally emotional in origin, or comes from a confluence of biopsychosocial factors that results in a felt lack of safety and a corresponding nervous system level hypervigilance that hits the pain button too early when there's may not be a physical problem or any actual danger. But similar to what Malcolm said, you can't just tell someone that they're safe and expect their pain to go away. In fact, that does actually work sometimes. Notable people do read books about psychosomatic pain and are cured through the information. But what I assume is happening there is that the person is doing some kind of dialectic or turning towards the objection and responding to it in an appropriate way in themselves as they confront the material. And I am frustrated with how little of the material encourages you to do that from the beginning up front. So like, look, we put in a 28-day program. This isn't going to work for you if you try to impose it on yourself. Yeah. Try to be nice to yourself and change in a way that will actually work for you as an individual. That led me to studying attachment as a whole, because we learn responsiveness well from healthy parenting, and we learn unresponsiveness to our own needs also from parenting in our early surroundings. Also, our like internal sense of safety is initially given to us by the people who are meeting our needs when we can't, or before we can. And you can recover that sense of safety by kind of doing a reparenting exercise, I have found, which can may need to be both multisensory and pre-verbal, depending on how early you started feeling unsafe. But I think that's enough introduction on me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into
we're
the next.
We're really gonna get into that sense of unsafety reparenting exercise in this transformation here. So for the listeners, it's gonna be a bit different today. There is no video because this was from another podcast. And also because it was from another podcast, I will be talking less because I'm doing a lot of the explanation in the podcast itself. I really want to allow Adam and Malcolm most of the conversation here, and I will just be occasionally interjecting. So with all that being said, let's get started.
I just want to take a step back and talk about where we are now. So we've gone through the...
So real quick, this is the second half, so I'm giving a summary right now of what's happened up into the session so far.
Provoking phase of evoking this feeling. And we then we're finding some resistance to the process itself, so we went to get buy-in. In the process of buy-in, we went to introspection, finding the deeper cut around wanting Chris's dad to love him. And once we did that introspection, we moved on to acceptance. We accepted the part from its own perspective, seeing all the things that were positive. And we also accepted parts from other perspective, from an outside perspective, maybe seeing some things that were negative and not needing to hold on to those, but still recognizing that they're there and there's some nuance. We call that the yin and yang of acceptance. And now that we've gone through the acceptance phase, we can go into a little bit of exploration of the part and the boundaries of it. We can ask some questions of it. We can begin to explore some nuances that maybe weren't there before. So, Cristofer, just let me know when you feel that you've embodied this part as much and as deeply as you can in this moment.
Yeah, so I feel fairly connected to the part that feels like a child. And I'm not sure if that is that part or something that part is protecting, or
Yeah, that's okay. So you're feeling really connected now as this part goes through your body to this part of you that feels like a child. Great. And as you connect to that part, what's coming up for you in terms of bodily sensations, memories, beliefs, or thoughts, or metaphors as you connect to that part?
I feel this urge to get something. And this is, we're going the whole 10 yards here, but I have a peripheral issue where I feel not only in my relationship, where often I want the affection from my wife, I want her to give me something rather than being able to give that. And that feels very childlike coming from a lack. And I have a peripheral thing where with attractive women in particular, where I really want them to validate me. I really want an attractive woman to notice me. And I feel like that is an extension of this somehow.
I wonder if you could just ask this part, how old it is, and notice what comes up for you.
I feel like my stock answer here is 4 years old. That always comes up. And I don't know if I've confabulated that or not, but that's what comes up.
Okay.
Did you have a thought here, Adam?
I could share what I am thinking, but I don't think it's no, I wasn't trying to volunteer something.
Oh, sorry. I saw you unmuted, so I was wondering if you wanted to say something.
You're totally right that I was unmuted, but I'm not sure why I did that. Sorry.
No worries. Feel free if either of you want to jump in at some point.
This part for giving that information, for being open to speaking here. And can you, as you imagine you or this part at 4 years old, do any images, memories come up around being 4? Even just impressions. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I got 5 up now, no 5 years old, and then I got a very, very vague memory of being at I don't remember exactly, but some kind of sports fair with my dad. And I just remember I'd never played handball before, and somehow I got onto the field and was supposed to be part of it, but nobody had explained to me the rules or what I was supposed to do. And I remember getting the ball and doing something wrong, I suppose, and feeling extremely shunned and like I was completely bad for doing that. And I don't remember my dad's reaction, but yeah.
Okay. So I want you now to, as much as you can, put yourself in that place. You're feeling 5 years old. This might be the genesis of this part, or maybe the genesis was a tiny bit earlier, but this is really a strong memory for this part. Allow yourself to just notice that, remember that, get into that. And as you get into that and allow yourself to get as much into that mindset, space, feelings, thoughts, intuitions as you can, I'm going to again step out and give some of my thoughts about what's happening here.
Yeah.
So when Chris talked about his desire to please women, and he talked about his relationship with his father, and he talked about deserving love, and he talked about doing the wrong things, all of these point to attachment issues and some sort of disorganized, insecure attachment. Now, as we begin to explore this, knowing that there's probably an attachment issue here, there are 3 pillars of beginning to treat attachment. One of them is metacognition, recognizing that your interpretations may not be correct, recognizing that there are other ways to think about the situations. 2 is having a model of secure attachment and feeling what it's like for someone to be securely attached to you and take care of you from that secure attachment. And then 3 is a feeling of a collaborative relationship with the caregiver. So as we begin to go into exploring and questioning here through this lens of this early formative memory, we're going to try and do some processes that can explore and question in all 3 of those different directions. What would it have been like? What would it be like to look at metacognition here? What would it be like to feel the secure attachment here? What would it be to feel a collaborative relationship in this moment?
So, excuse me. So I'm having some issues getting out anything more from that memory. It's very,
That's okay.
Yeah, it's very vague, but I did get another memory that's come up a lot. I don't know if it relates, but I have a memory of being at an island in Sweden called Marstrand. Also, when I was young, maybe I get up 4 there too, 4 or 5. And my dad and I, we were up by a castle that's very famous there. And I remember we were flying a kite or something like that. And I remember there was this guy who came up to us who was maybe in his 30s or something. I don't know. But he was just, and you can feel a person is just off. There's something weird about him and you don't get a good feeling. And I just remember strongly feeling that this person wanted to hurt me somehow. I didn't feel safe. And I remember my dad, I just wanted him to pick me up or like clearly tell the guy that, because he wanted to hang out. I think he even said that he wanted to hang out with me or something creepy as shit like that he wanted to fly the kite with me by himself or something. And I was terrified of that. And I couldn't tell my dad. And I just wanted him to put his foot down and, mark that, no, I'm protecting my son and he needs to be right now. And that I remember. Yeah.
So I want you to step out of that memory now and hang it up on the wall as if it were a TV screen. So you can watch it from a little bit of a distanced perspective here.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And as you look at that memory, what is the meaning you drew from that moment? What is the meaning of that memory for you?
I'm not safe.
I'm not safe. I'm not safe. And what was the meaning you drew about your relationship with your father around that not being safe, if any?
I mean, that he won't be there to protect me.
Yeah. I'm not safe, and my father won't protect me.
Yeah, maybe I'm not worthy
that-
of protection, something like that, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. All right. So I want to check in. I'm not safe and not worthy of my father's protection. Does that hit for you? As you try that meaning on, does that really feel resonant?
I don't get clear resistance to it, but I feel like there might be some nuance there.
Just taking a moment, allowing that to come up, allowing what nuance wants to be added here.
It feels a little more less about my dad and more about I'm not safe and no one will protect me. I feel like that feels better.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not safe and no one will protect me. Does that feel resonant for you?
Yeah, that feels much better. Yeah.
Okay. So, looking at this picture now, and you can imagine that was the meaning you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, in terms of like commenting stuff. This isn't a particularly deep thought as far as I can tell, but it feels interesting, which is to note that even just having the really basic like I haven't gone that deep into the attachment stuff yet, despite starting this discussion group, but even just having the basic list of the 5 components of secure attachment, the first one of which is safety, and then there's also, I think, like comfort and physical affection, attunement, unconditional delight in your existence, and unconditional support for your explorations. Even just having that list gives a different read to something like, okay, if I'm tracking some sort of attachment thing that's happening, there's a way in which those 5 kind of go in order, and I think I switched the second and third, attunement and then comfort. It feels to me like they have some kind of a not perfect, but some kind of an ordering where it's like if the safety thing isn't there, the rest of those things are hard to even quite get, maybe. But it's like having that gives a different read to what it means for somebody to have a memory where they don't feel safe. And I mean, there is also, I think, in that situation pretty clearly a lack of attunement on the father's part as well, right? And so I guess it's occurring to me as I say that like it could have been interesting to check with that, or somehow it's like, in addition to the safety piece, to really ask, like, did you feel like your father was totally not attuned to you? Just checking if that's part of the meaning experience. I don't know, there's something interesting to that. Yeah, anyway, that was my thought.
Matt, I want to give you a chance to respond to Malcolm and what he said if you're going to, but I also want to know whether you're expecting people to have already listened to the first half of this session with the other person's show, or are people expecting to come into this not having had that contact?
I'm expecting people to come into this fresh. So if there's context you're missing here or questions you have about the first half of the session, please presence them. This is an experiment. The 2 previous episodes had the full session, and I'm trying to hone in on particular things in this episode. So I didn't have any particular thing to respond to Malcolm, except that I want to look more into those 5 things that you mentioned. I'm not sure I've gotten to that point in the particular book I'm reading yet, and that was very useful for me as well. So thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah, I've also been tracking that it seems that, like, insofar as there are components to what it means to like really trust somebody, there's like a bunch of other things that could be sort of named as well, in addition to those 5 dimensions that are very particular to the sort of infant relationship. It's like trusting that like somebody will hear you out and will not like insist that they understand what you're saying until you can tell that they do, right? It's like another like basic thing, like or various other things that show up more in like adult style relationships, like trusting that we a feeling of having shared values, for instance. But we're getting a little off track here.
And I think some of this stuff might come up. We'll see. Adam, did you have anything you wanted to ask about the first half of the session?
I want to just articulate some things that may be implicit in what we're doing here, but that I think it'd be good to level set for both for listeners and for me. It seems, here's my read on what's happened so far. Based on events that I don't necessarily have complete access to, you've identified that this person could benefit from looking into their attachment patterns or doing attachment repair, I think that's, I don't have enough information to say whether this person's attachment is insecure or not at this point. I think just like merely wanting validation doesn't necessarily disqualifying, like maybe it disqualifies him from being completely enlightened, but I think there are secure people who want it, validation as well. And so far during the session, we've looked at 2 memories where there's potentially a benefit to be had from reinterpreting the memory or integrating the experience in a more detailed way than one was able to when it happened. And I think both of these experiences are really archetypical of that kind of thing. Like, I think you can, in this, being hand wavy here, encapsulate a trauma or create a personality, either part or layer, whenever something happens too confusingly or too quickly, or is like too bad for some definition of bad for your level of resources, for how old you are, for how much you understand, etc. So we've seen 2 options where like things happen too fast because I didn't know the rules and people expected me to, and I was just like very literally out of my depth. And there's another situation, and this is a memory that the client has said comes up a lot, or is in some way like perhaps being proposed by the body as like, I'd really like to get some resolution here and I don't have it yet. So it keeps like coming around again and around again. And that's this situation where, one, he felt extraordinarily unsafe, and 2, the person, like the main person who is supposed to define a safe perimeter around him in his life that other people can't get through, his dad, isn't doing that for some other reason. And in both of those instances, it seems like the approach you're taking, Matt, is like whatever the client says either is the precisely correct and perfect thing to work with now as like the cornerstone in an arch, or like the limiting reactant in like a variable or like a chemistry equation or something like that. Or maybe this isn't the thing for this particular person, but they are set up in such a way that this was a big thing for them at a time, and probably represents a class of issues that they run into over and over again in their mind. So if he feels unsafe, this probably wasn't the situation that originally like shattered their sense of safety in the world, but through working with this situation, we can learn kind of an archetype way of delivering safety to ourselves. And then maybe that can kind of tile across all of the experiences that we've had from like one day developing the belief or anticipation that I'm not safe, and then kind of proving ourselves right for the rest of our lives through the power of confirmation bias and everything else.
And self-fulfilling prophecies.
Right. And self-fulfilling prophecies, and meeting your destiny on the road you take to avoid it, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. I tend to think of what's presenting as a way in to the deeper pattern. And it's hard to say whether or not this was formative, but something does not need to be formative to be a way in to reforming.
Cool. I think that's really good to level set around. And I think that helps me understand the next point that I was going to make, which is that in the ideal parent figure protocol, or like the current understanding of attachment types and attachment theory, your attachment type is more or less set by the time you're 20 months old. And there's a way in which the true core early attachments experiences can't come up in the context of an audio recording because they're nonverbal. But so in that theory, the way to achieve transformation is to go back to picturing yourself, at 20 months old or less, and try to give yourself experiences of like parenting that are just right for you and ideally suited to you. And they even say that before you try memory reconsolidation or integration of trauma of any kind, you should make sure you do have enough attachment security to the point where you won't just get re-traumatized or entrench the lesson rather than allowing it to flip. So I think that the fact that I don't know necessarily that this is going to be out of order, or like that this person should do more attachment work before they try to do this memory reconsolidation, because I simply don't have enough information to say, because I didn't do the first half of the session. But I feel like the general approach of like using the later archetypical issues as an entry point and potentially like wanting to either represent security yourself, so this person's going to be okay, or just kind of understand that attachment repair and memory reconsolidation or trauma integration, like there may be some path dependence there, are important things to say in terms of people understanding this recording.
Yeah, and I will say just briefly that I think Dan Brown is confused on this point, that you need to take care of the pre-verbal stuff first. It hasn't been my direct experience of working with people with these types of issues before I knew that they were called attachment issues. You do need to handle the pre-verbal stuff, but I haven't found that sort of dependence in my own work. But we'll see as we move on here.
Hey, Matt here. This is just me being a little defensive. The thing Adam is saying here is important, possibly correct, and I should not have just dismissed it. If you listen to the full episode over on Cristofer's podcast, you'll see there's a very big, large part at the beginning where I talk about the dangers of the type of trauma work we're doing, and I think Adam is right to presence that here.
Okay, can I respond to that before we move on? Because I think he isn't saying that you need to by any means, and I don't want to represent him as saying that. He's saying that if you do, according to his proposed ideal parent figure protocol, do a lot of work picturing your ideal parents giving you ideal care, sometimes at that point you spontaneously resolve things that are holding you back without needing to do a kind of exercise like this. Like, I think the model is not like you need to have a secure base before you then go explicitly solve all of your slightly inelegantly consolidated memories. But the model is something like, if you try to go trauma first rather than safety first, bad things can happen. You can end up less secure and more entrenched. Whereas if you go like early childhood attachment, relational, like attachment repair first, sometimes that sort of spontaneously takes care of a lot of memories, not by magic, but just because when they come up, and you know, as this client has said, like, this comes up for me all the time, then like you can kind of do micro hits of transformational activity, or like your mind knows how to organize itself because it's had organization demonstrated to it very clearly. His data set for this was people who sued their care providers for making them less mentally healthy, and over the course of therapy, and convincing them that they had been like sexually abused or incredibly neglected or something like that. It comes from the work that he did in forensic psychology, and that's the data set.
So that
and the claim,
that model, that starting with visualization rather than directly doing experiential therapy, is a protection against potentially unskillful practitioners making mistakes, I would absolutely agree with. And that is the framing that I would put on that. I feel like I want to make sure that we move on from here. I feel like we've looked at this from a couple different angles.
I'd like to make one last quick comment, just because it relates to some of the stuff Adam was saying, but it's kind of just like sort of a link out, which is, there's a video that I'll send you guys the link to, which is called something like "When is Attachment the Issue?" And it's Bruce Ecker from the Coherent Psychology Institute talking about that on some podcast with somebody, and it's pretty cool. Like they sort of talk about, like, you know, they're talking about it less in the context of attachment repair and more in the context of like attachment therapy, where the therapist provides the secure like feeling for the client. But in any case, it is an interesting video that I liked a lot, which discusses exactly this question of like, how can you tell if something is about attachment or if it's about some actually totally unrelated schema that's causing interpersonal issues like attachment, but ones that are like, but like it's actually generated from a totally different than like early childhood stuff. So anyway, I'll send the link to that.
Yeah, and I will include that in the show notes.
Yeah, great.
All right, so let's keep going here.
You're in the moment. And you can imagine if you were a film critic, a third person, just watching this movie, just watching what was happening. There's potentially other meanings that could be drawn from this scene other than this person is unsafe and no one will protect them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want you to do is just give me another meaning that you could have drawn from this situation.
My dad is insecure and he doesn't know how to act.
My dad is insecure. Act, okay. Great. What is another meaning you could have drawn from this situation?
I mean, I guess I could have... that I was never in actual danger. Maybe this was a nice person and I just remember it that way.
Yeah. That was never in actual danger. Actual danger. Okay. I'm safe. My dad's right there. He would have done something if anything bad had happened. Right?
Yeah.
My dad would have acted if I was in actual danger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he might have... Yeah, he might have even... Yeah, no, that's great.
What other meanings could you have drawn from this situation?
He's trying to teach me to handle myself, maybe?
My dad is trying to teach me to handle myself. Okay, great. Let's go for maybe one or two more here. What's another meaning you could have drawn from this situation? Maybe something totally unrelated to safety and danger. Is there another meaning you could have drawn from here?
We were having a nice father-son.
Having a nice father-son time.
He wanted to share that with me because he loved me.
Okay. And one other interpretation here could be related to safety and danger, could be totally different, whatever comes up for you.
Flying a kite is hard.
Flying a kite is great. Okay, so what I want you to do now is, in a moment, we're going to have you step back into this memory. And we're going to have you imagine as if you had drawn each of these different meanings. Okay? You're just going to notice what it would have been like to draw that meaning in that moment and see that memory through that lens. Okay? Notice how you would have felt different. If you would have acted different, notice that. And just take a moment. So I want you to hop back into that memory as vividly as you can. Imagine you're there. Imagine the same things are happening. And the first thing I want you to do is imagine, okay, what would it have been like to draw the meaning, to be thinking, feeling, flying a kite is hard in this moment, okay? I want you to take a moment to see what that would have been like. And let me know when you've run through that.
Yeah, I'm more frustrated that it's not working well and this creepy guy is bothering us.
Yeah. Okay. Rewinding the memory back to the beginning. You're there, you're feeling what you're feeling. The situation is happening. And the meaning you draw from this is, my dad is trying to teach me to handle myself. Notice what that's like.
And I'm supposed to like go through the same motions, or is it okay to tweak the memory a little bit to...
If you would have acted differently.
Yeah.
You can imagine, yeah.
Right.
I don't want you to change what actually was, but if you would have acted differently, you can change, your actions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want you to watch through it again and notice what it would have been like, or what it was like, to draw the meaning, I'm unsafe and no one will protect me.
Yeah.
I want you to go through and notice what it would have been like in that moment to have drawn the meaning, we're having a nice father-son time. My father wanted to share this with me because he loves me. Notice what that would have been like to draw that meaning.
Yeah, I'm having some resistance to that. Like I'm getting a voice saying that, yeah, but he wouldn't have done that this way if that was the case. Like I'm resisting it a little bit.
Okay. That's okay. So let's move on to the next meaning here. What would it have been like in that moment to draw the meaning? I'm not in actual danger. If I'm in actual danger, my dad will act to protect me. And finally going through again and drawing the meaning, my dad is insecure and doesn't know how to act. Okay?
Yeah.
Now,
So just real quick, just a brief thing here. The reason this is going through real quickly is because all of the pauses where he actually did this have been edited out. That's why it's going through so quickly. This took a little longer than we're hearing.
one final thing I want you to try. Imagine if you're in that moment, you begin to draw the meaning, I'm unsafe and no one will protect me. And then you recognized that there were other ways to interpret this situation. And you brought up several of these different ways. What would it have been like to draw one meaning, then realize that there were other meanings to draw, and think about some of these other meanings? Notice what that would have been like in this moment. Great. So I want you to go ahead and hop back out of that memory, viewing it again as if it's on the wall.
Yep.
And now when you look at that memory, does it still feel in your heart of hearts that it means I'm unsafe and no one will protect me? Or does it feel like that's just one of many possible interpretations? Either answer is fine here.
No, I'm not as sure of that as a description of truth anymore. And I actually just want to add to this. It's super interesting how well it ties into the epistemology of this underlying this podcast. Just that it's all conjectural, it's all interpretation, and everyone is fallible. You don't have the absolute truth. But as a kid, I guess these interpretations are it's easy to draw that conclusion that this must be the absolute truth. Yeah.
And so you know now that it's not true. I really want to check in. Does it still feel true, or has your feeling changed around it?
No, it doesn't feel as valenced anymore.
Got it. Great. So taking a step back here, one of the three pillars is metacognition, right?
Right.
And so what we've just done is looked at what would it have been like to have the metacognition in that moment to notice that the way I'm interpreting this is maybe not the full way. So sitting with that, checking back in now with this sense of anxiety, or what was anxiety, noticing if your internally bodily sensations have changed at all, and just connecting with any changes, if any, have happened.
Yeah, I feel much more calm and less kiddie, like a kid.
Yeah.
If that's a word.
Yeah. So we're gonna, I think, stick with the same memory, and maybe what we'll do is try one of the other pillars here. So from this outside perspective, I want you to notice your father. And I want you to imagine what it would have been
Ask
like
you, Matt,
to have...
I want to chime in and ask what led you to continue looking at this same event or memory after hearing that there'd been a resolution so quickly. That feels kind of jarring, or I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there had been a metacognitive resolution, but I want to tie in the two other pillars here, the sense of secure attachment and the sense of collaboration. And it's possible to go out, find another thing to work with to get those two other things done. But given that the other memory that came up, he said was too weak to really access, I was a little worried that going to do that would take a lot of time to find another way in. So I just wanted to use the same way in to create some of those things that Malcolm was saying, right? To create those feelings, that sense of secure attachment that he could then export back into pre-verbal memories and also forward into other experiences he had in his life. So that was what I was thinking in that moment. I'm not saying that was right.
Are you going to do that exporting later in the session?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm interested in that because it's like when I first heard you talk about just trying to get the I forget how you phrased it just now. It was like trying to get the other two things of like secure attachment and collaboration done. I'm like, done, like just in that memory? Like, I don't know, that feels like sort of the wrong.
Done for this particular schema. There's
Yeah.
still I've now taken this on this person as an ongoing client, and there are still other schemas here around attachment that we're working with. But for this particular schema, yeah, getting those 3 pillars as handled as can be, right? There's still stuff that will come up later.
Yeah. I'm having a bunch of my own interesting reactions just to this overall exercise, but I don't know to what extent it makes sense to sort of go into that.
I want to first hear, because Adam, I want to hear your reaction to my thoughts, and if you would have done things differently here, or
Yeah.
That's a good question. Give me a second to structure a response to that, and then perhaps in that pause we can hear from Malcolm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So what I was noticing basically was that when I oriented to the sort of film critic thing, you know, what are the different possible meanings of this? I noticed that my own system had a feeling of like distrust of that process, and which, you know, the simplest version of it would be just something like, well, what, basically like a sense of like, what if I lose track of the thing like that's really important here, like the, you know, and so this connects with the whole, like the role of self-trust in all of this, and like the role of having like meta level frameworks also that gesture at the extent to which it's possible or likely when doing a particular exercise to lose touch with something. And it's generally been my experience that you kind of can't lose touch with something important forever. Like you can compartmentalize it away, but like if it doesn't feel resolved, it'll come back. Like that's a pretty reliable thing to trust. But there's something I still don't understand just about myself, or about, of like why I had the experience I did, because I had a tweet the other day, which has been sticking with me as a thing I've been thinking, which is basically like your experience, everything that happened to you, all of your experiences are real, but they don't imply what you think they imply in general. Just like in general, like we are bad at implications. Like, and there's something that feels deeply true to me about that, but maybe it's like not integrated or something as like a thing I've now perceived, because it feels like that's exactly what you're doing with this exercise, and yet my system goes, don't do that. And so I'm like, that's weird. Like, what is that about? So anyway, that's me.
So so a little bit of context. The first half of this session that we didn't hear is actually quite valuable on its own, because it was basically dealing with the problem you're talking about for the first half of the session, of him not trusting the process at all, anything we did, and just, that's welcome. What is that trying to tell us? That's welcome. What is that trying to tell us? Yeah. Right? And then getting to a point where we could move forward in a way such that all of that wisdom was coming along with us. And so we're in a session and you were feeling this right now, I wouldn't be the buy-in stuff that really you turned me on to, and it's now so integrated into what I do. And like, if we were working together, we would not just keep going with you feeling that feeling, right? It would be a process of saying, can we keep doing this process? If so, do we need to tweak it at all? If not, what wisdom do you need to take along to make sure that the thing you're worried about does not happen, right? So I thank you for presencing that.
Cool. Yeah.
So to go back to your question, Matthew, I believe what you asked me is, would you have done something different in this particular case, like made a different distinction at this juncture? And I think my answer to that, it doesn't matter if I would have taken a locally different action, if I would have taken a globally different approach. And I think what I'm learning, what I think I'm seeing here in this is an effort to understand like what is transformation made of, and how can we decompose that into the parts of transformation and facilitate those parts in the correct order such that transformation occurs, or something like that. And it reminds me a lot of how I expected to be able to work with myself and with other people. And I feel like I've done the let's design the one true framework activity quite a bit, like enough to see something about the truth of like there not being a fully universal flowchart, or that's like part of what's hard about the DAO is the DAO that you can write down is different from the DAO itself. So I would have done a lot of things different, because to me this does feel like we're walking through a flowchart, which can be extraordinarily effective, but loses some of the native responsiveness that I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that a lot. There's a question, right? The DAO that can be written down is not the DAO, and yet there are the Four Noble Truths and the Sevenfold Path and the 10 Boomies, and like it can be useful to provide a map, even knowing that the map is not there. And for this particular podcast, I was really trying to show that map. And I agree with you that some of the responsiveness was lost here quite a bit. So once again, thank you for presenting that. I agree. And even saying that, it still might be that even in my more responsive, when I'm working with a client and it's not going to be used as a teaching opportunity, there still might be quite a bit of difference there. In that I'm sort of using this process as a rough guideline in that sort of thing, while leaving space for that thing. And you might almost reverse that. Yeah. So thanks for sharing. Do you have any response to that or thought, or are you ready to move on?
Totally makes sense that this is sort of the context is a demo up on a stage, rather than like something, call it more natural, fluid, responsive. I think that helps me understand what your goal is together in this experience more than I did before I said what I said. So thanks for that. Right. I think I still have a lot to say about the particular approach, but I want to comment on the most important thing, or like the most important difference between how you and I would have approached that. And not having seen the full session, I don't know if we're there yet. So I'm in favor of moving on.
Yeah, I guess I've
Sounds
got
good.
one more comment to make, which is something like there's a deep paradox or puzzle here or something, which is like perhaps the same as the bit about the DAO, but perhaps yet a different, like a deeper layer or something that's related to some. I was having a conversation with a friend about this just recently, and we were talking about like this thing where so many people who invent a new therapy modality or whatever, it has a kind of magic, but like when they teach it to people, the people seem to like not. It doesn't like it still works, but like the difference between Doug doing biomotive for somebody versus like me doing it, or is vast. The rapidity with which Bruce Ecker goes boop 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 boop, hey, I found your schema, is just like like an order of magnitude or two greater than the kind of like what you might expect from somebody who only has a few hours of training or a few dozen hours of training in the thing, and hasn't like found the generator of it, right? And so when I think about like what is insofar as this is some sort of instructional demo training thing intended to convey Matt's technique, it's like, yeah, but like how do you convey the generator that led you to develop the technique? It's like that feels like the thing that I really want to see. And and maybe these conversations and recording and publishing them is part of that. It's like, because you get to see that the three of our thinking processes in dialogue about it, and it's that kind of thinking process itself that generates a living responsive technique, something like that. Maybe
Yeah. All right, let's keep going here.
How much do we have left?
Have the ideal father figure in
about a half hour.
This instance. Have a father figure that was securely attached to you, that knew your needs, that knew exactly what you needed in that moment, and was able to react and provide that in that moment. So I want you to run through, try and make a change internally or externally to your father, and run through a few times until that feels like, yes, that would be the ideal father figure in that moment. Okay? If you need to change how he looks, that's fine. If you want to keep it looking the same, that's fine too. right? And run through, and this is from an external perspective. You're not in the memory yet. You're just looking and notice how that scene would have been different with the ideal father figure. When you feel like you've got something, let me know.
Right. So tweak the scene and perhaps my dad to more of a secure, how I would wanted him to act there for me to feel safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Not just how you would have wanted him to act, but if he was the ideal father figure, he had the exact thoughts, feelings, behaviors of the perfect parent that you would have needed in that moment. What that would have been like. And as you're doing that, just a little bit of meta. This is called the ideal parent figure protocol. It's from a particular type of attachment therapy. And again, we're going now to the second pillar of secure attachment, which is experiencing that feeling of secure attachment, experiencing what it's like to be in a relationship with secure attachment from your primary caregiver.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. This would have been great.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've gotten now what that would look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I would view perfect parenting. Yeah.
I don't know if we want to go into this at all, but I feel a need, just as being part of this as a live conversation, to say that this is not my understanding of what the ideal parent figure protocol is. In particular, they are very explicit about don't start with your existing parent and like make modifications, like pick a completely different parent. You know, I default usually to a blonde woman because my mom has dark hair and is just like a very vivid contrast or whatever. And I don't know to what extent that is critical to how the technique works, but it's just important insofar as you're saying not this is inspired by the ideal parent figure protocol, but this is the ideal parent figure protocol. I just wanted to note that there's at least one
and this is
difference. I don't know.
This is actually really important. I tend to do this. I tend to make this mistake when I'm trying to make sure I attribute the things I'm doing to their sources or to what inspired them.
Yeah.
Is that I say I'm doing a thing and I'm not really doing the thing. I'm taking mental moves or models inspired by them and trying to fit them into a broader framework. So this is something that I know I do badly.
So a subtle language thing where you're like, this is a variant on, or this is a, whatever. It feels important too in terms of because it'd be very easy for someone to listen to this and go do the thing and then just call it ideal parent figure protocol. And now you've got like two distinct contradictory things out there calling themselves ideal parent figure protocol. And so we can at least somewhat subvert the extent to which that would happen if somebody listened to this recording. Yeah.
Thanks for saying that, Malcolm. I agree.
Yeah, cool.
Now I want you to allow yourself to jump into that moment and experience what that would have been like to be in that moment and feel that love and caring from your father and protection as well. And you can go through that as many times as you're still getting something from it. You're still feeling something good from it.
All right, I'm happy with that.
Great. Jumping back out now from the memories, if it's on the wall. And I want you to imagine attaching this next to the other memories. You have the other memory of what actually happened, and your many different meanings you could have drawn from this. You could paperclip them together. You could attach them in a file. However you want to attach these two versions of this memory together now. Allow yourself to do that and let me know when that's done.
So a quick thing here, I don't think I mentioned it in the episode that's important to get back to Malcolm's point, not wanting to lose the important thing. Whenever I am making a quote unquote false memory, I always want to make sure it's somehow attached to the actual memory so that you are not drawing incorrect conclusions in that way from it.
So the version of all the interpretations and then the good one?
Of all the interpretations and then the imagination of what would have the ideal father in this scenario would have done.
So I attach them somehow, yeah.
Yeah, great. Have you done that? Or are you still working on it?
I'm still working on it.
Okay, let me know.
All right, yeah.
So now, we're going to try something else here. We're going to do a few more things just to experience the secure attachment. I want you to try and jump back into that memory of you and your father with the ideal father figure. But this time, I want you to notice what it would be like from the perspective as your father to be that ideal figure, to be thinking in that ideal way, and to be giving it to Cristofer in that moment. Okay?
Yeah.
So I want you to allow yourself to experience that as many times as you can, in as many ways as you can, until that feels like it's no longer doing anything for you, and there's nothing more you can get from that perspective or that experience.
So I put myself in his shoes and experience it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In the ideal father figure shoes, yes.
Yeah.
Great. Coming back out. Looking at those two memories attached to each other. Noticing how you feel now internally. Has this feeling, this part of you that was anxious, has it shifted internally? Are you feeling any differently about it as you connect with it?
Yeah. I mean, if anything is left, it's much thinner and much more further away.
And would you describe this differently than anxiety now? Is there a new name you want to give to this part of yourself and this feeling?
I don't know. It's a weird tinge of maybe, I feel kind of content right now. I can't tell if that's the part related to that, but I don't feel.
Okay. So we're going to do one final thing here, and then we're going to go into some integration. You know, if we were working together as clients, we might work together with that as a memory and do some integration later. But I want to go into the final pillar here, this collaborative relationship. And so I want you to connect with now your feeling around your relationship with your father, how it's shifted, your feeling around attachment and how it's shifted. And I want you to imagine now that it's not some ideal parent figure, but there's your father there who wants to protect you. But maybe he doesn't know what you need in the moment, right? Maybe he's not perfect at reading your needs and reading your mind.
Yeah.
And I want you to notice what it would have been like in that moment to communicate what you needed from your father. And for your father to want to give that to you and provide that for you once you communicated what you need. So it's not the perfect figure who just knows what you need without doing it, but he's good enough. And once you're able to communicate that and you feel safe in communicating that to him, he's able to give you what you need. So now imagine what would have been like in that moment for that to happen. And this will be a third version of this memory that we'll save.
So it's still on the TV or on the wall? Or do I...
Still on the TV, get to a point where it feels good, and then you're going to jump into it once you've gotten that version of the memory down and it feels realistic and accurate and powerful to you.
Got it. Yeah, I'm actually having trouble with it a little bit. I'm getting a distraction from another known voice that comes in sometimes. And It's the voice that... My most clear example is getting a massage that I've waited for a long time, and it costs a lot. I'm at a spa. And all I'm thinking is, when she's rubbing the back, oh, is she going to do the arms? And when she's doing the arms, oh, I hope she doesn't forget I'm tight in the ankles. And like not being able to enjoy that. So that voice came in now. Oh, but what about the physiology and how you're afraid of doing stuff? Are we going to get to that? What you would call that in the process? But yeah.
Yeah. So welcome that. You know, I'm happy to, talk about potentially working with you further. I think when we check back in with this, we may find that some of that has shifted as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that was not an urge for you to stay with me for 4 more hours. That was just what the voice was.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, I sort of welcoming that voice, understanding that voice.
Yeah.
And we'll get to what we can get to. Yeah. Is there anything that voice needs now in the moment? That it needs in order to move forward?
I mean, I feel, I feel shame towards that. Like, that is shameful to think that and want. This goes into different things as well. Like, I ask for something that I want and I feel like I'm being a nuisance, or like you're taking more than you should and you're being obnoxious.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't feel resistance to continuing. I don't think, no.
Okay. Yeah. So as we continue here, you can just welcome that we can do so in a way that honors both that shame and that desire to make sure we cover everything. And as you do that, you can allow yourself to edit this memory in a way that edit this new memory in a way that honors both of those needs.
So is that a general thing where whenever resistance comes up, I acknowledge it, I thank it for what it's trying to do, and then I try to move on if I have.
If there's a way to move forward that can honor the needs of it, yes. Yeah. All parts are welcome. There's no such thing as resistance, just more wisdom for how to approach the process.
Right. That's nice.
Now allow yourself to step into that from your perspective and feel what it's like to have had that collaborative relationship where you're letting your needs known and your caregiver wants to help you meet those needs.
Yeah, that's great.
And now stepping into your father's shoes in this moment, noticing what it would have been like to be him in this moment and being asked and wanting to meet those needs.
Yep.
Okay. Stepping back out, connecting this third memory to the other two in some way, and letting me know when that's done.
Yep.
Okay. Now looking at these 3 images, videos, however you're seeing them, this old meaning of this was, I'm unsafe and no one will protect me. What is the new meaning that you draw from these images?
Yeah, I'm safe.
Anything else? Is that what's coming up for you? I'm safe? Is that complete?
I'm safe and I should be protected.
I'm safe and I should be protected. Okay. I'm safe and I should be protected. Do you deserve to be protected? I want to check in with that. Either answer is fine, yes or no.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. As you say that out loud, I want you to hear that, notice how that feels, and notice if there's any resistance as you say that.
No, I don't think so. I I often feel very, very subtle movements in the solar plexus, but not.
Yeah. Great. So say it out loud. I want to hear you say, I'm safe and I deserve to be protected, like you mean it.
Oh, this is the hard part. Yeah. I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
Hear that? Say it again.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
And one more time.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
Do you feel any resistance coming up in you as you say that?
No, I felt fairly good doing that.
Great. Where are you feeling that? What in your body as you say I'm safe and I deserve to be protected?
I mean, I have, also in the solar plexus chest area. And I kind of got my wife can be a force when reckoned with. So I just got a flash of her protecting me, being angry because someone was trying to hurt me, kind of, as corroborating evidence of this.
Great. So sticking with that feeling for a moment, I'm just going to go meta for a second.
Yeah.
Talk about where we're at. So we went through questioning and we explored this memory, this formative memory. We could have explored through beliefs. We could have explored through feelings. We happened to go with memories because that was what was coming up for Chris. We went through and we explored them through the 3 pillars of secure attachment. And now we have one belief pillar of secure attachment here, which is I'm safe and I deserve to be protected. Now, and again, that was through memory reconsolidation, we activated the old schema. We then created a juxtaposition that said that might not be true with these 2 different types of memories, with these new forms of experience. And then we learned a new schema, which is I'm safe and I deserve to be protected, to replace the old one. So now we're in what's called a reconsolidation window. We have about 30 minutes or 3 hours where this new memory is in a label state. And we're going to try and add as much corroborating evidence, as many different anchors for this during this labile state to make it as strong and powerful as we can. So I don't want to spend too long on this. I know we've been here a long, long time, but I do want to give you just a few integration tools here to make this much stronger, to make this much more powerful.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm more thinking of you. You're doing me a favor here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this stuff. I do.
Okay,
so
that's great.
So you just said that you now had an image come up of your wife protecting you, right? So I want you to take that memory you created earlier, those 3 things that are connected, and this memory of your wife protecting you, and I want you to put them in the same place, in this new place in this new database you're now creating of I'm safe and deserve to be protected. Okay?
Right. So I put the 3 things that are connected together in the same place as this memory.
Yeah. And let me know when you've created that place and you've put them in there.
Yeah. It's a box.
Yeah.
Very creative.
And now I just want you to allow yourself to run through your life from very, very young all the way up to now. Notice all the other times that fit this idea that you're safe and you deserve to be protected. And allow yourself one by one to add them to that box. Okay? So just take a couple minutes here, run through your life, the different periods in your life, and notice all the memories that fit this idea that you're safe and you deserve to be protected, and add them to that box. I want you to get to where there's no doubt you have so much evidence that you're safe and deserve to be protected.
Yeah, I'm getting some doubt there. I'm getting some what if you can't find any, or what if you find evidence to the contrary, like some little resistance.
So I wanted you to start with allowing yourself to find memories, and we are going to address that resistance in just a moment of what if there is contrary evidence.
Right.
Okay? And ask that part if it's okay to be put aside for a moment if we address it after we go through this first step.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, I got a good good handful at least.
Okay. Now, were there any resistance around memories that were sort of counterexamples to this? To I'm safe and deserve to be protected?
Resistance to counterexamples? What did you...
No. Were there any counterexamples? As you were thinking I'm safe and deserve to be protected, were there stuff that come up that's like, I'm not so sure because of this, because of this? Was there anything that came up that was like that in terms of memories?
I mean, I remembered a particular instance or two where I felt like I didn't get the protection I needed. But but not a strong. Yeah.
So it's actually very important when we're building new self-concepts to include counterexamples, right? Because you don't want, when you go out into the world, you're going to run into situations where you might not feel safe, right? And if your self-concept is built around, well, I never ever am in situations where I don't feel unsafe, it's going to shatter immediately. But we can build in these counterexamples to this self-concept. And we can throw in, okay, here's counterexamples, here's times when maybe I wasn't acting through this idea that I'm safe and deserve to be protected. And we can make this much more robust.
I don't know if I present it on the podcast, but this is inspired by Steve Andreas's work on self-concept.
Yeah, I was literally just writing in my notes. It's like, oh, this particular approach feels connected with some of the Andreas coming to wholeness type stuff. Maybe a slightly different technique than coming to wholeness. I forget exactly what all the names of them are. Is that the coming to wholeness one, or is that a different one?
So the collecting memories
and like
is present in a lot of it's present for a lot of different NLP processes and techniques, but particularly related to self-concept. There's a book called Transforming Yourself by Steve Andreas.
Right, yeah.
That does this sort of thing for self-concept.
Yeah. Very cool. I want to comment one or two other things that feel related here, just while we're paused. One of them is, I really haven't seen other folks emphasize as much the juxtaposition-induced labile state, labial, I don't know how to pronounce that word, as much as I've seen you, Matt, consistently do. And I don't know why that is. Like, it's talked about in Unlocking the Emotional Brain, and probably mentioned in Kai's summary and stuff like that, but I haven't seen any reference to like, hey, we're currently in a window where you can like more usefully like integrate and like whatever this stuff, like I haven't seen that in any other kind of demos that I've watched, or working with my own coherence therapist, or it's mostly just sort of like, okay, cool, we did the shift, great, good work. And I don't know. That just strikes me as interesting and significant. Like, curious how that hasn't been more prominent in what Bruce Ecker's doing, for instance, given that he does have that like front and center in his framework. Yeah. The other thing that I'll say is, unless either of you wants to respond to the thing I was just pointing at around the window of opportunity there. The other thing that I'll say.
So real quickly, I don't have a long thing to say, but I will say that my experience working with people is that that window is a real thing. That is, when I do the process right after a reconsolidation has happened, they tend to stick more. And in episode 2, there's a really cool thing you can do around shaping the state, adding things like love and excitement and energy to that belief. That is a really cool thing you can do in that state. So if people are interested in that, check out episode 2.
Cool. The other thing I'm sitting with is, like, I noticed as I was listening to the last few minutes of this recording that we just listened to, I noted I was still not feeling totally confident that what Matt was doing, or what Matt was having Chris do, wasn't still kind of layering over fears or unworthiness or something like that. I feel less worried about that with the whole "it's really important to include counterexamples" thing. That sort of feels like, okay, we're gonna like construct a new foreground, a new kind of basic emphasized frame, like a kind of, you know, a new primary signal, and then we're gonna like add some, like, you know, nuance to that from in the form of these counterexamples. I'm sort of like, okay, that seems like maybe a way to kind of not end up compartmentalized or something. Yeah. But it does still feel pretty different from...
Yeah, and I think I may have screwed that up. So we'll see. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just really struck by like what it was like to have him say, you know, 3 times, like, you know, I am safe and deserving of protection or something like that. I was sort of like, I was struck by how counteractive that certainly could be, but it also felt like maybe it did come somewhat out of stuff that he had been observing himself, and you were just sort of having him deepen it. So just like really wanting to kind of track that, I guess.
Yeah, and the thought process when doing that was actually, it was not an integration process, it was an ecology check. So what I was really interested in was if he said that and then he was like, he was nervous when he said it, or it didn't feel quite right.
Yep.
Because saying something out loud is a good way to presence those
totally.
sorts of non-ecological.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like how, you know, how Jensen has you, you know, find things you might want to do focusing on by saying everything in my life is going exactly as it should be right now, and you just like, you watch any parts of you that are like, no.
Yeah.
What about this though? Yeah. Cool.
Adam, anything to add here?
Let's talk about it after we get through the recording.
Sounds good.
So I want you to bring up maybe one of those times when you felt unsafe. Okay? Are you comfortable sharing the memory or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure unsafe. I mean, okay. I felt really scared and put out and like I needed help, I guess. Could that be close enough? Or
Yeah.
We were in Spain and we had rented, actually it's a slew of similar ones, but I had panic disorder, not clinically diagnosed, but I had panic attacks out of nowhere seemingly for quite a while. And so it would either be we were in Spain for a trip for 2 weeks and I would not be able to sleep and I would have panic attacks and I would run out in the garden and cry by myself and be really scared. Or I would do the same in my apartment in Sweden when I was living with a buddy. I would just run out in the woods in the middle of the night. Same kind of thing. And I felt like Yeah.
Great. Okay. So I want to do, we're going to do a couple of things here around this. Okay?
Yeah.
So looking at that memory as if it's on a television screen.
This was one of the things that I almost just said, but since he brought up panic attacks, I will bring it up. I just want to share that at this point in the recording, I kind of share Malcolm's intuition that working with Chris in this way is likely to lead to compartmentalization. And I think we saw that when Chris said, like, oh, I'm worried. What about all of the physical stuff? Yeah, after going through the 3 dimensions that you two covered, like, what about the panic attacks? That I think he's actually starting to go into here, which leads me to believe that he's not really yet anticipating himself showing up with different motor plans in the world, or like genuinely doing different things.
Interesting. Yeah.
Worth bookmarking right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a few things here. So one of the things is around self-concept we can do. And this comes from rapid transformational therapy. As you look at this image,
Once again, I'm not doing rapid transformational therapy here. I'm using mental moves inspired by it.
I just want you to, I'm going to give you a sentence stem, and you're going to say the stem and then let whatever arises from that come up. Okay? So when you look at this memory, I want you to say, that's not me because, and see what comes up.
Right. Like the new memory we're talking about.
No, the memory as it was, the one where you were going out and going into the garden.
Yeah.
As it was, looking at it, the you in that memory, that's not me because, and see what comes out. It can help to do this out loud.
Yep.
And just see what comes out. Yep.
That's not me because I'm lovable.
Another one. That's not me because.
That's not me because I would ask for help.
Again.
That's not me because, yeah, I'm getting the anxiety again. Coming in. Blocking my creativity a little bit.
What is the anxiety wanting in this moment?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Just welcoming it, sitting with it. If we continue here, is there a way to go forward that honors this anxiety, or does the anxiety need you to stop in this moment?
It's hard to say. I feel like we can keep trying and see
All right.
how it reacts.
That's not me because, in a way that honors the anxiety.
That's not me.
So one of the things here is we're sort of coming to the end of our time, and I don't think I handled this anxiety perhaps the most skillfully as I could have, but such is life. So let's keep going.
Because I don't feel like that.
That's not me because I don't feel like that. Okay. So stepping now into that memory, what could you have done in that memory if you had the belief I'm unlovable? All right, just want you, I'm lovable. How would you run through that memory? How would you have acted differently in that memory if you had the belief I'm lovable?
Okay, so the memory.
Yeah. So you had 3 that's not me because, that's not me because I'm lovable, that's not me because I would ask for help, and that's not me because I don't feel like that anymore. Okay?
Yeah.
So I want you to jump back into this memory as if you're there experiencing that sense. Noticing what it would have been like in that moment to feel that you are lovable and to ask for help. How would it have gone differently? What would it have been like to act through this new sense that this new belief, where is it? Did I not write it down? But the new belief is that I'm safe and I deserve to be protected, right? There we go. Let me write that down.
Right.
So what would it be in that moment if you had thought that you're lovable and you had asked for help? And notice and just run through what it would have been like in that moment to do that.
And how did I connect it with the belief, did you say? I feel like you mentioned.
Yeah, I just want you to notice. I just want you to notice in that moment what would have been like to think that you are lovable,
Right.
and that you would ask for help.
Yeah.
Experiencing what that would feel like, look like, how that would have gone differently. Okay, jumping back out now, viewing it as if it's on the wall, and connecting this new memory again to the old one. Here's what happened. Here's how I could have acted differently in that situation from this new sense. Letting me know when you're done. Are there any other memories now, other times when you felt unsafe or not cared for, that want to change in similar ways, that want to join this memory in noticing what it would have been like to think that you're lovable in that moment, ask for help, and recognize that that's not you because you don't feel like that anymore?
I mean, yeah, the memory that we started with, I think.
Yeah. Allow that to join this now, and allow that to change in similar ways. Again, keeping the original one, but attaching this new idea of what could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Adding these two now to the box in a special place for mistakes you've made, for times that maybe you don't feel safe. And noticing that you can choose to act in ways that allow you to find that safety. Noticing that in the future you might run into these situations. And that you can allow yourself to find safety and protection in those places. Letting me know when that's done and those feel added to that box in a special place for mistakes and counterexamples and how to act. Okay. Saying again out loud, I'm safe and I deserve to be protected, like you mean it.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
Noticing how that feels. Has that feeling shifted at all as we've created this box, or is it the same? Either answer is fine.
When I say that, it feels good. I felt a little anxious doing the last two there because I felt like I was getting a little tired and conscious of the time. But that sentence feels like it's not just a platitude. I actually feel like that makes sense to me.
And does it feel any different? I'm trying to check if anything happened with that box. If it feels stronger, weaker, or the same as you say it now compared to before we did this box.
I'm safe and I feel like I deserve to be protected.
Not that you feel like you deserve to be protected.
Yeah, you're right. I noticed that.
Try again. Yeah.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected. I think I feel a little sensitive about those memories that we brought up. That's coloring it a little bit.
Okay, is there anything else that needs to happen here with those memories to get them more integrated?
I guess the issue I have is when I'm trying to envision myself asking for help in those scenarios, I don't feel like I would have gotten the help I needed anyway. Because of who they were, the people that I would have asked in that situation. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bringing those memories up again. Putting them side by side. That's not me because
I have people in my life who would help me.
That's not me because
I wouldn't allow myself to get to that point.
That's not me because
I'm lovable.
So, can you imagine now, I know you couldn't have done it in that instance, but if you had people in your life you could go to, if you were at a place where you wouldn't get to that point, if you're at a place where you're lovable, can you imagine what it would have been like in those instances to have those things in place and to act in that way? In other words, maybe at that moment, at that time, it was impossible, but where you are now, could you imagine how things would have gone differently?
Yeah, this is brilliant. Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. So, again, putting those back in the box, noticing now how that might feel different, more integrated.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have suggested something here that works, I'm smiling ear to ear. So I just want the listener to know that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me know when they're added to the box.
Yep. They're in the... Yep.
Saying again, I'm safe and I deserve to be protected, as if you believe it.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected. I deserve it.
Okay. How does that feel now? It's stronger than before we had the box, weaker, or the same?
Yeah, stronger.
Great.
Because it shows me that, yeah, I'm not frozen and stuck in the states that I were then. There are other options. It's, yeah.
All right. So I sort of want to end it here. There's a lot more we could do with integration. We could integrate different metaphors, different ideas. We could integrate it deeper into your body. There's actually one thing I want to do that I think is really important to do here.
All right.
I just remembered that I was going to go here next, and I think it's actually pretty important. So again, I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
Noticing where you feel that, noticing the part of you that believes that. Asking that part again, how old are you? And seeing what comes up.
Yeah, I'm trying to analyze it because it doesn't make sense to me, but 6 I got now.
Great. It doesn't have to make sense. Now asking this part, would it be comfortable growing up now? Experiencing not just who you were when you were 6, but all the rest of the experiences of your life. Integrating all the wisdom you've had to... How old are you now, Chris?
29.
Yeah, all the way up to 29. From 6 to 29, experiencing all that wisdom. Ask that part if it's ready. It can still maintain that inner child, but it also gets to have all this wisdom. Can you ask the part if it's ready to grow up now and experience that?
Like including the insights we just had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to allow that to happen. Allow that part to grow up, become older and deeper and wiser, and experience all that. And let that happen on its own time, and let me know when that process feels complete.
And just to be clear, I go through my actual life, not what it would have been like if I knew this then.
Whatever the part needs to grow up, you can go through.
Right.
As it wants to grow up to 6 and 7. Yeah, typically you would go through your actual life, but whatever the part needs in order to experience that growing up now.
I feel more like a gorilla now than a puppy.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to get to this was you mentioned earlier that you felt very young when interacting with people.
Yeah.
And often this is because we have a part that was when we were 6, and it's still that 6-year-old. And growing this part up now, saying again out loud, I'm safe and I deserve to be protected.
I'm safe and I deserve to be protected. Fuck yeah.
And does that feel stronger, weaker, or the same as before the part was grown up?
I mean, I feel like I'm buzzing a little bit now in my body. So yeah, it feels good.
Great. So checking in, again, asking this part, how old are you? And just seeing what comes up.
I almost unanimously get resistance when I ask this because I feel like I'm making the answer up.
That's
and
okay.
I'm thinking too much.
What's the first thing that comes up? Yeah.
The initial thing was 29, which would be great.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and this is, it doesn't seem logical when we ask this, but it doesn't have to be logical. If that's a good check to do, if that's the first thing that comes up, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and stop the session here.
So that was really fun. I noticed Adam having a lot. I noticed Adam having a lot of skepticism and resistance, which I'm really curious about at this point. I'm really excited to get that sort of feedback. I'm also curious about Malcolm's thoughts and just any final thoughts we have here before we wrap up. So either of you feel called to add something?
Yeah, I think I'd love to ask you, given that you now have the benefit of working with this person on an extended basis. My prediction going through this session is not that safety would be no factor in this person's life after having this experience with you, that they would still be maybe wanting to work with you on it, or maybe still like experiencing safety concerns in their own life, but feeling like they already addressed that, or like shouldn't be that way anymore, or like should just be able to welcome that lack of safety and like find a way. But like I want to like couch most of what I'm saying in predictions and outcomes, rather than like, you know, my process is more nuanced than your process or whatever. But so like, what's your expectation for what the actual outcomes would be from this, and how well have those been borne out in reality?
Yeah. So my expectations are something like there's a permanent shift that's something like 80% ecological, meaning 80% get down to the roots and 20% has been layered on top. And so that will show up in relationships, in behavior, as well as in feelings. And that will sort of be a remaining 20% that comes up in therapy that will then have to tie back to the work we did here in order to sort of do that final cleanup. So when I do an integration like this, I do the sort of checks we did, and I get the sort of answers that I got. That is like my typical expectation. There's other times when the checks are 100% congruent. There's no resistance. And then I expect much less layering, maybe, 95% get into the roots and 5% has been layered on top. And there's other times, like the session with Malcolm I did the other day, when it's more like just the beginnings of something, right? And it's clearly not very deep. And so I expect more like 50-50 or 40-60. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I really appreciate you using numbers there, but I noticed they didn't actually help my understanding of how you expect this person to be different in relationships, or like what the
what would be evidence that somebody else who didn't know that this therapy event had occurred, what kind of evidence might you expect somebody else might observe in this person's life that would be representative of that 20% layering, and how would that be different versus if there had been 0 layering or 50-50 layering?
Hey, it's Matt from the future again. And I think the thing that Adam and Malcolm were looking for here, rather than a number of 80-20 or something like this, was just, what do you think happened here near the end of this session? So I'm going to briefly give my perspective then and my perspective now, having heard some of Malcolm and Adam's comments. So essentially, when I did these ecology checks, having Chris say out loud this statement, as they rightly pointed out, it was very clear this was not like ecological. They pointed out a few things. One of them was when he said, this is the hard part, that's already what pointing at it's not ecological. Another thing that maybe they didn't point out is that at the end, when he said it, he was like, oh, fuck yeah. That sort of energy is often, not always, but often counteractive. It's trying to push away some other thing saying, no, this isn't true. More often, when you have a deep ecological integration, it's much more like sort of a wondrous child, like, oh yeah, I am safe. I too deserve to be protected, rather than this fuck yeah energy. So, it was very clear to me as a coach that this was not fully ecological. And the question is, what do you do with that? So the first thing you want to try, or I currently think you want to try, is seeing if you can just very quickly integrate the resistance. Sometimes after you've done a lot of this resistance integration throughout the session, you've just had a reconsolidation, and you're in self. This is sort of the perfect storm of being able to integrate a lot of things very quickly. So that's what I tried to do. I said very quickly, welcome the resistance. What does it want? Just to check, hey, is there a very quick thing we can do here? Now, when he said, no, I think we can move on though, that's an indication, okay, we can't do just a quick integration here. And looking at the time, we don't have time to do a deep integration. So now I have a choice as the change worker here. One is I can just presence. All right, we've still got resistance here. There's some exercise you can do to play back and forth with this resistance, with this new knowing, and just play with that as you move forward. But Cristofer is in deep faith right now with this new knowing that he is safe and he deserves to be protected. He's getting so much from being blended with this belief and feeling that he's never been blended with before, that I don't want to reintroduce doubt into the process. I want him to consolidate that faith in a way that makes sure he doesn't get himself into a bad spot. So instead what I did was I went and I brought in the counter examples idea. So, okay, you feel safe and you deserve to be protected. But if you don't feel safe and if you don't deserve to be protected, what is a strategy you can use to get back into faith with that? So we went through, and a strategy basically ended up being ask for help from people that care about me, which is a great strategy for this particular issue. So the full reconsolidation was not, I am safe and deserve to be protected. It was, I am safe and deserve to be protected, and if I'm not safe and I don't deserve to be protected, I will get help to get back into that belief. That's fairly good, and that was my thought at the time. Now, one thing Adam brought up is this idea of the danger of doing it this way and not presencing that there's still resistance, is that there's this belief in belief. I think I should feel safe and deserve to be protected, right? And so there's this sort of self-denial when you get out of this state. So with that, what I would have done was exactly what I just said. And then at the end of the session say, so I think there's still some resistance here. Here are the reasons, and here is the strategy you've decided to use when this resistance comes up. Just a presence that, okay, there's still more work to do here. So I hope that clarifies things, and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Maybe
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the real question that the question here is there the first question to see if there's been any change is, does the person do other people notice the difference without it being present to this person, right? Which is just like, has something shifted? That's a really good secondary or like maybe lagging indicator if something good has happened. In terms of the layering, that's probably harder for someone else in their life to notice. It's much more likely to notice as a therapist when you find tendrils leading back to this. They're not quite ecological, not quite fitting in with new stuff. Stuff comes up and you find, oh, it's still tied to like some issue here with this belief that wasn't quite fully ecological. So that one's harder to presence, but I think it's pretty clear in a, I don't want to say clinical setting, but when you're working with somebody and the issue that you already dealt with comes up in a different way, that something there is going on.
So, let me ask you a more like yes or no question. Is this still coming up? Like concerns around safety and protection? Because I would predict that it is.
No, it came up. So there were a few things to clean up that came up in the next few sessions.
Okay.
It hasn't come up since then. That's not saying that it couldn't come up in the future, but I expect it's basically cleaned up now. 98% cleaned up around some of the lingering stuff there.
Got you. Okay. I mean, I asked that question because I think I anticipated we would disagree on how effective this intervention was done. And I'm not actually sure, or I don't feel like I succeeded in operationalizing precisely how much we disagree, because I said like I would expect more things to come up, and you're saying like, yeah, there was some cleanup involved, but now everything's resolved or something like that. Let me just say a little bit more about where that comes from.
Yeah,
or, like,
please do.
What are the major things that I'm noticing?
Yeah.
I don't think that the ecological checks, like saying something out loud like you mean it, is a universal test for compartmentalization, because it essentially only checks whatever parts he uses to speak with. Or like it's
or whatever parts are
with,
like allowed in the room at that time. Yeah.
Like
I have felt such deep, utter conviction about new experience, like new possibilities and new experiences and mindsets and assumptions, and kind of, I see this paradigm in which I don't need to be afraid of any of these things I've been afraid of before. And I'm like, yes, that is so obviously true. And part of what made it so obvious was that none of those fears were in the room. Right?
Yeah.
And so actually, and as we've noted, the presence of those resistances and, can be a good sign and all of that, but also the absence of them doesn't mean they're not there. They're just not right there. They're somewhere else. Right?
Yeah. And I think we got direct evidence of that in this session itself, where he said with pure conviction, or like he said it felt good to say, I'm safe and I deserve to be protected. But then as soon as it came time to look for evidence of that, he was like, oh, this feels weird, it feels squeaky.
Oh, yeah, this is the hard part.
And that was only 10 seconds
Like,
later.
Yeah.
Where so and
Yes.
it's not just like I don't think the checks are sufficient. There were a couple places in this where it just felt to me like he was being kind of led along and almost guessing the password and continuing for the sake of going through the process or something like that.
Yeah,
I know that it's verbally in your toolkit to welcome everything that arises, but I think you can do something that is nominally supposed to welcome things, but in fact actually dismisses things. Like in the cases where you ask, does this anxiety need anything in order to continue? Like, what if what if it needs, or like doesn't feel like it's okay to need anything or to stop things on its behalf?
Yeah.
Or like, what if he can't actually pay attention to the anxiety well enough to check whether that's true? Like it seemed like over and over again that question sort of caused him to like just continue, and in which case it might be that all the anxiety wanted was to be felt for a brief interval of time, and like just
but we
noticing
don't really
it.
know that.
But we don't really know
And
that.
we don't have a reason to like assume that that would be true in a way that we'd be like, yeah, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I think just to presence everything you said, I think I don't disagree with so far. So yeah, continue.
Yeah. So I think like, and just two more points from me. My going back to the beginning of the session of like the path dependency of how much do you focus on pre-verbal intuitions about responsiveness before you do trauma processing of any kind. I don't think the path dependency there is to insulate people from unskillful practitioners. You know, according to Dan Brown, who did the forensic psychology work, the people who he interviewed with weren't like particularly unskillful. They were generally doing the right things and being relatively conservative in a lot of the cases. I think that I don't think you can dismiss his view of like what's the correct ordering, what are the path dependencies and the risks, just by saying, you know, that was a couple of unskillful people, because
like,
essentially we are all unskillful, and that's why we are doing any of this work in the first place. And the main person doing the work is the person who has admitted that they don't need skills and has sought, or don't have skills and has sought help to sort of to account for
that's a
that.
good point.
Yeah. So like, and perhaps like the times when you're being the least skillful is when you think you have a given level of skill. You know, if Plato is to be believed. Guys, I said there were 2 points, and one of them had something to do with what Malcolm said earlier, but it has since escaped me. So I'll bring it up if I remember it. Gosh, it felt very important at the time, so I'm aggravated. But I think this gives us enough food for discussion.
Yeah, I can riff something on.
So I want to bring up one thing. So there's probably one point of disagreement I may have here with the stuff you said. By and large, agree. The pre-verbal thing, I've heard a lot of claims about like not being able to use verbal beliefs to work with pre-verbal learnings. And I'm still looking into this, but also I am a bit skeptical of this, just having worked with people, noticing how these things work. I think things are basically always stored pre-verbally, no matter what it is. And when we're working, we can then access things through stuff like memories and verbal expressions and stuff. So that is like one area of maybe not total disagreement, but a little skepticism on my part that like pre-verbal things cannot be worked with through, for instance, stated beliefs. So that's like maybe one area of disagreement that could be quite significant to looking at this stuff. But all of the critiques you gave and the worries you had about the session, I think are spot on.
Cool. While you were talking, I thought of the last thing, which was like leaning on transmitting the generator, as Malcolm was saying earlier. I think that given that you were kind of the one doing the wayfinding for what comes next, and dictated a lot of how that came to be, this wasn't a training exercise in like him bringing up his own inner knowledge of like what's the most appropriate way to
Yes.
respond to his like environment, like what actual concrete action to take next. And I think like the wayfinding is the most important part, or like one of the main things that would actually result in him behaving markedly differently when you're not around.
Yeah, let me think. Do I want to respond to that? Does that need to be responded to? So I'll give my thoughts here with the caveat that, again, this is stuff that I'm still grappling with and working with. So the way I view the first session with somebody is guiding them to mental moves that their brain can make. Just sort of saying, hey, try moving your brain, or your mind, I should say, in this way, and seeing what happens. And as I continue to work with somebody, the wayfinding around when to use those moves begins to get more and more transferred over. So that's a thought there on that. But again, this is all still being worked on, developed, understood, learned, intuited. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me in general, just like as a structure. It's like in order to wayfind, you need to have a sense of where you can go. And sometimes that's going to involve somebody like being like, you know, what if you put your limbs into this position? It's like, did you even know they could do that? You're like, oh, I didn't. Oh, well, that feels, and then, you know, you can sort of recurse on like, well, okay, well, so what's the generator of that and what's the generator of that, and kind of explore those things a bit more. Yeah, and I mean, that's part of what's also tough about assessing this. Beholding is more the word I want than assessing, even just like interpreting, understanding the meaning of this session kind of on its own, you know, and only even the second half of it, and with a bunch of the silences like edited out and stuff. It's sort of like, okay, what is this, right? Like, what kind of artifact is this? What does this represent as a unit of transformation, right? If that's the thing we're talking about. And yeah, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of other things I'm sitting with too. That's sort of one piece.
I think it's also worth drawing. You said like, I don't know if this is a disagreement, but in terms of like how memories are stored and whether there's a big difference between verbal and pre-verbal. If you think like there isn't a big fundamental difference, I think that is like just a stark disagreement. I think there's a huge difference between how memories are stored before like you speak and how they're not. And like and I don't even think that's the only big divide necessarily in terms of like what querying strategies work for accessing which information. So some people have theorized that the reason people have a like infantile amnesia, I'm not sure what the technical term is, but the reason you forget a lot of stuff from when you were 4 or earlier is possibly because it's just stored in a different file format, and that you forget how to query once you like are storing things verbally.
That's such a great metaphor.
Yeah, as a computer scientist, it's really persuasive to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Could you send me some information on that, and I'll if you have it, I'll put it in the show notes, and I'll also take a look at it.
Gosh, I don't know if I have a single source for that.
Yeah.
If you do, feel free to send it. If not, that's fine too.
I'm gonna try riffing on that a little bit. There's something that is interesting about being a human with human hardware.
Just one thing?
I said something that is interesting. I'm not saying this is the thing that is interesting about being a human. There are many, but one relevant piece is something like there's a, you know, even if the human brain can sort of implement a Turing machine or, you know, sort of compute arbitrary things, there's also a sense in which we have a bunch of hardware that like does a bunch of specific stuff and is like and itself is remarkably general in what it can encode, but like has, you know, as Adam was gesturing at, kind of certain like built-in file formats, or, you know, equivalent, right? We don't want to reify file format too much, but there's an architecture to the whole thing. And so what I would posit is sort of almost certainly true in some sense, and the question is just in what sense and what does that imply, is something like there's a bunch of basic self-universe definition work that happens at in a part of the brain that's probably even like low. So there's like you know, like brainstem lizard brain type stuff, while also just giving the general caveat that we don't have a lizard brain. We have like a thing that sort of corresponds to that, but is like, you know, made to work with the mammalian complex and the whole everything else. My what I'm positing basically is that there's a thing that happens typically during the first couple years of life that is like sorting out the basic who I am and what sort of place the universe is. That is a different kind of pre-verbal than, you know, muscle memory for a skill you learned when you were 5 or a skill you learned when you were 15 or something. The pre-verbal or unconscious is not a single thing, and framing it as such is like the word Gentile. Like, what kind of word is Gentile? It means those who aren't us, but it's like it's not a natural category or something.
Right.
Like it's a, and similarly unconscious or non-verbal is like not a natural category. It's a category that privileges the verbal or conscious perspective in the first place.
Sure.
And so from that perspective, what I would say is, yeah, any work that you do with emotional reconsolidation, transformational work is necessarily going to contact the unconscious, because if everything were conscious already, you'd just be sorting it out in a kind of methodical, straightforward way. You just be, oh, well, I have this consideration of this one. Let's make a spreadsheet, you know, or you do whatever you do with conscious stuff, right? So there's necessarily going to be contacting the unconscious. And then, okay, well, what is the unconscious? Well, turns out there's a bunch of right hemisphere unconscious that has a lot of really subtle, detailed, stuff to it. The kind of stuff where when you're focusing, you're like,
I like that.
Is it
I like
more
that
like
distinction.
is it more like a crushing?
Yeah.
No, it's more like it's more like a smashing, right? And you're like really like you're feeling into the nuances of all these little words, or you're like, oh, I walked into the room and the vibe just seemed a little off. Oh, I remember Karen had an interview this morning and she looks kind of upset, and maybe you're just kind of like watching all the subtleties.
Right.
Meanwhile, your limbic system is like, oh shit, that guy looks like my dad and he looks angry. Oh god. Like there's like a kind of very basic, like very simple meanings there, right? The kind of, emotional brain type thing. And so these are two totally different kinds of unconscious memories. You can put either of them into words.
Yes.
But they are both also not stored as words. And I think Adam is positing in particular that there is yet another kind of unconscious that is not even just limbic system of like, oh, here's my emotions and basic memories and expectations like that, but is more this self-universe thing, which in a mammal includes a basic model of attachment, because part of universe is being cared for by mother and father and so forth.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, anyway, that's part of a model for thinking about some of this stuff.
Other things, floor's open.
Well, I'd be curious. Like, let me start by saying, like, I had a negative reaction to the exercise where you were having him generate a bunch of different possible conclusions that he could have had from the experience of standing next to his dad where he felt like his dad wasn't protecting him. In that place and in one other place in the recording, it felt like there was a baked in assumption of something like, all interpretation is flawed, stories are just stories, or like some like attempt at encapsulating a kind of wisdom by dissolving everything that's not wisdom. But if everything is dissolved, then like what then do you cohere to? So like I think in spite of having like, or like after you impose maybe a portfolio approach and like probability masses to like what could have been going on really in that situation, whatever that means, at the end of the day, your body has to output one motor pattern for like, what do I do right now?
Right.
and I can't do like action A with 20% probability and action B with 80% probability.
Yes.
Or like if I do,
Yes.
I'll probably end up with
Yeah.
like weird muscle tension of some kind or another. So
yeah, absolutely.
I wish I could remember the other situation where this
So my
struck
guess
me,
is
but
it's the "that's not me because" is that the other one that you're
yeah,
referring
yeah. There was like an interesting similarity there between like, okay, you've generated all of these things,
Yes.
and what are you left with? And like,
Yes.
are you? Is this
both
like,
of these are doing that similar move? Yeah.
and is it an
I
attempt to like
appreciate this.
realize
This
some
is-
Buddhist truth? Is that truth actually true? The common
it could
element
be
is
used
something
that way,
like
certainly. Yeah.
the common element is like if you know which direction to go, you're already there, or like you should already be there, and you like forcing yourself into the direction is not just bad epistemic hygiene, but it doesn't work for the reasons that Malcolm was saying in the beginning of the call of like, you can't just impose a reframe.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
like,
I lost the thread there. So how does the like noticing the perspectives relate back to not imposing a reframe? I sort of lost the thread of where you're going.
it's a good question.
I could try to
Malcolm,
say
do you feel like
something
you can
that might-
yeah, perfect.
Yeah, well, it's something I was sitting with already. It feels related to what Adam said and might also answer Matt's question. Maybe it will do none of those things, but I'm going to try it, which is something about reification. And this is part of like, what happens with words and so on. So it's like meaning is of and in words, but is not words. Maybe it's more accurate to say words are of meaning.
So as you continue to talk, which I'm happy to listen to, just presencing we've got about 3 minutes left.
Right. So there's a thing about reification. There's a thing about like when he says I'm safe and I deserve to be protected. It's like it feels to me like the words of that are very distinctly reifying safe and deserve and maybe also protected. And that's totally different. Like the reification of that as I'm safe and deserve to be protected. It's like that's at best a scaffold upon which like what Adam's calling motor intentions, a basic but even beyond that, it's like I felt similarly a bit about the box of mistakes. Like at one level I was like, that's a really cool thing, I like that, but I'm like, I don't want to reify anything I have ever done as being a mistake. And
yeah, interesting.
Like it's only a mistake from a particular frame or something like that, which clearly was not the frame I was holding at the time.
Yes.
And so there's a thing there, right? And so it feels like there's a similar thing where it's like, okay, if I go and come up with all these other meanings, well, I've now reified a bunch of other meanings a little bit, but possibly the act of reifying 5 additional meanings to the one I had in the first place might have some unreifying effect on some level. We're getting dangerously close to reifying reification here, but that's so
yeah, this is something I've been sitting with a lot being at a Buddhist monastery. One of which this is not going to quite fit into either of the perspectives you both just shared, but it will unreify by providing more perspectives, which might then not give you something to grab onto, as Adam was saying. But so I've been grappling with this idea of this process, or this version of this process, ends in a new learning, right? A new emotional learning. And a lot of what you're doing, a lot of the Buddhist perspective on this is to get to know you, to get to unlearning all things. So I've been talking to people about this, and one framework that I've been taught is this idea of climbing a ladder. And each of these new ways of seeing that are more integrated, that are less friction in your environment, is like grabbing onto the rung of the ladder. But in order to get to the next rung, you need to let go of the rung you're on, right? So these rungs, these new perspectives, are places from which you can act to let go on a deeper level and let go on a deeper level and let go on a deeper level. And yet they're still useful to have those rungs. You can't just like swim to the top from this perspective, from this metaphor. So that's like one thing. And I will say, so, and then the other frame that came up for me was this idea of like, one framework I've been using is like, you sort of need to skillfully, if you're getting to a new place, you sort of want to, there's like calcified beliefs and these sorts of things where you're looking at many different perspectives, sort of chipping away, noticing, hey, there might be nuance here. There might be something I'm missing. That then allows you to, at the end, the thing was, okay, what, you know, given all these perspectives, what's your new belief here? What's your new thing here? But you needed to be able to sort of chip through, pry out the current emotional learning in order to get to the new emotional learning. So those are two things I've been sitting with. We don't have time to get too much into it, and I know you guys need to go, but feel free to respond or leave depending on where you're at. I want to give you, before we chat more, if either of you want to chat more, I want to give you a chance to talk about where people can find out more about you or anything you'd like to share about stuff you're working on. So why don't we start with Malcolm there?
Yeah, I mean, I am findable at malcolmocean.com or at Malcolm_Ocean on Twitter. Malcolm has 2 L's in it, MALCOLM, although the domain will redirect if you forget the second L. And yeah, I do writing on topics like these and everything else insofar as there is anything that isn't somehow related to this sort of thing. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll respond with one final thought, which is like the Karenina principle of the first sentence of Leo Tolstoy's novel Anna Karenina is that happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And I think the opposite is true. Like, getting a well-organized mind is a unique individual achievement. And everyone who occupies a distinct economic niche in a happy way does so with like different strategies than the person one niche over from them. Everyone already has their own unique strategies for weighing evidence and coming up with what to do next. And the more you can tap into all of the skill you already have to do the thing that's unique to you, the better off you'll be. If you want to keep up with me, the best way to do that is on Twitter. My handle is at AdamJOG or ADAMJOG. On Twitter, I don't have as much writing out there as Malcolm. If you are sad about that because of something interesting I said, DM me and say you should write more stuff. I would find that very inspiring and helpful.
All right. So thanks so much, guys. If you wanted to riff on anything, feel free to stay for the next few minutes. Otherwise, yeah, have a great day. I'm pretty excited to share this episode out there. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that happened in the session, and there's even more cool stuff that happened in the comments. Sometimes you get people that are scared to push back, and that saddens me. And there's a lot of pushback here, and I appreciated it. So thanks both. Hopefully I'll have one or both of you on again.
Yeah, I think that would be cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is just such I appreciate your willingness to like put yourself out there and publicly have people, you know, talk about what you're doing and push back and all of that. And it feels all part of this deep conversation about like how do we so like I have a general principle that says something like, if you try to point at somebody's blind spot, the default way that conversation is going to go is not well, because in general, like the person whose blind spot is trying to be pointed at will be like, what? I'm sorry, what? No, there's nothing there. I don't know what you're even talking about. Why do you keep pointing at this thing that's not there? Don't be ridiculous, right? Like there's like a kind of natural tendency to be like, I can't even fathom that you could possibly be talking about something real or relevant. Like that is what a blind spot is, right? In the psychological sense. And so there's this paradox, right? Where it's like you clearly want all of that stuff illuminated, but the process of actually like speaking it well, and or like on our parts, or first of all, speaking it at all, right? Rather than just being like, wow, this is a cool session. Nice. Good job. Yeah. Cool. You know, speaking it at all and then speaking it well. And then the learning process of you being able to hear and integrate the kind of stuff that we're trying to say, that in and of itself, I think is not, you know, in the same way that we're still really trying to figure out how this whole therapeutic reconsolidation thing works.
Yeah.
for just like individual symptom, recoherence and stuff. There's also a thing where it's like dialoguing between people about stuff like this is also not a solved problem. Like it's not, we don't know how to do it in general. And so, this feels like a cool context to practice that. And, I'm wondering like, what would it be like to have, like people watch this episode and comment on it live? I'm not saying that's necessarily a good idea, but it's a neat thought, right? Like, oh, I think Malcolm and Matt are kind of talking past each other on this point. There's something where Matt seems to think Malcolm, is like.
And just a quick thing on that for anybody who made it all the way to the end and is still listening. I'm looking also for this podcast. I don't just want it to be me. If you do this sort of thing and you would like to record something and have this sort of discussion about it, I have been trying to suggest to people, get people. I now just recorded a session where I had somebody do work with me just so I could get that session recorded and share it on the podcast. So if you have anything like that, please share. But yes, I appreciate that, Malcolm.
Cool. Yeah, I might be interested in that at some point. Yeah. Cool. Oh yeah, this is. Oh,
anything
this
else,
is
Adam?
Glad you're doing this.
It seemed like you had something to say, or did you decide that you didn't?
I was just very appreciative of the similar things that Malcolm was appreciative of, and tickled by the idea of going even one more level meta than this, and having the video frame slowly include more and more frames of people like poking.
There once was a ship that put to sea.
It's like asynchronous circling. That's interesting.
Recursive circling. It's concentric circling.
All right.
The image I have is like when you share a screen of someone sharing your screen, and then it just goes off. And...
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a great day, and we'll see each other soon.
Cool.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Transformational perspectives.